homeland of the Lenape people, excuse me. But currently, I'm coming to you from Taiwan, my home country, which is the ancestral land of 16 different indigenous tribes. And now, I would like to take a moment to mention that November is National American Indian Heritage Month, and we are elated to celebrate and uplift the native peoples of this land, past, present, and future. And we give special acknowledgement to the Wampanoag tribe and all others who commemorate the National Day of Mourning. So I want to invite all of us to share where you are coming from and the land acknowledgement in the chat. And if you are not sure about your land acknowledgement, or if this is a new idea to you, you can visit native-land.ca, which is also in the chat, is a great resource to begin with. And land acknowledgement should not just be a statement. It can also and should be an action that deepens our connection to the history and the modern nature. And it also allows us to recognize our privileges and to appreciate the land that we are standing on. And if this is your first time participating in MTEA event, welcome. MTEA is an international community composed of professional scholars and artists in musical theater and beyond. We support and advocate for the community through an anti-racist and inclusive lens across all aspects of identity. And if you would like to learn more about our organization, please check out our website, www.musicaltheatereducators.org, which is also in the chat. MTEA is committed to provide and create safe and brave platforms and spaces for musical theater educators and professionals to connect, to share ideas, and to learn from each other, and most importantly, to challenge each other. We are working very hard on creating events like this series and many other various workshops throughout the year. We also have our annual conference that is coming up in January. So now I would like to pass the microphone to our Vice President of Conference, Kikau Alvaro, to share more information on that with us. Hi, Kikau.
Hi, Leo. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. My name is Kikau Alvaro, he, him, and I'm joining from the Lenni Lenape land, colonially known as Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I am the Dean of the School of Theater Arts at University of the Arts. Also, as Leo said, I serve as the Vice President of Conferences. I'm actually really excited about this upcoming conference happening in January because it will be the first of the conferences that will be primarily in person. So it's very exciting. The theme for this year's conference is Moving the Line, Discovering Generation MT. And I just want to make sure I get all of the details out to begin with. It is January 4th, 5th, and 6th in New York City. The entire conference will take place at Open Jar Studios, which is really right in the heart of Times Square. If you're thinking about what your accommodations are, you'll be able to participate in a day, 3 days of events, and then be able to make it right to your show if you'd like. You can also experience the conference in a virtual or remote way as well. We will put in the chat a link towards the way in which you can sign up for the conference yourself. I wanted to take a second to just talk about what the conference is. It was actually how I personally discovered MTEA to begin with. I attended my first conference as a student at SVSU, where I was getting my musical theater MFA in San Diego. And it was just an amazing opportunity to be able to connect with other folks who were interested or doing the things that I wanted to do as a student, and found my way in that way. This year, the theme that we chose was Discovering Generation MT. I just want to give a little background about that. I was feeling as a professor, this feeling like, you know, you hear that term like, oh, I'm a millennial or I'm a Gen X and I'm so different from Gen Z and you know, I'm a baby boomer and I'm here in this space. And I thought it would be really fun to really kind of take us away from putting ourselves in categories and just sort of say, here is this new opportunity, Generation MT. It's a space that is meant to actively include members of all ages and identities, and and meant to push the art forward. I liked the term discovering because it also felt almost archaeologist. Oh my gosh, I can't even think. Art
Archaeological.
archaeological. Thank you so much. I'm like, someone save me. Archaeological. Thank you. Where this space for folks interested in musical theater exists, and we have to kind of chip away at what might be in the way of it. So this year, we accepted conference presentations that address accessibility, anti-racist theater practices, consent-based practices, new theater technologies, self-care, and gender identity in musical theater. We have some keynotes that are happening on day 1 and day 2. And then day 3 is the day that we divide up a little bit and split up into focusing on dance, voice, and acting. And each of those are also very full days. And you're able to pop in to one or the other as the day allows. As a reminder, January 4th, 5th, and 6th, I'm so thankful that Leo afforded me this time, and I'm just so thankful to all of our guests to be with us. If you have any specific questions, please reach out to our MTEA admin address, and we will make sure that we get them answered. We're really looking forward to spending some time with you in New York City. And if you are joining us remotely, I will say those will be available on the day. We also will be able to send you recordings. So we really want to make sure that it's fully accessible and that you are able to experience the conference as you are able to. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Kikau. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all there. So before we start with our panel today, I want to address that this Sunday, November 20th, is Transgender Day of Remembrance. And it started in 1999 to commemorate all the transgender people who lost their lives to violence since Rita Hester, a transgender woman who was killed in 1998. And each year, a week leading up to the Transgender Day of Remembrance is Transgender Awareness Week, starting from yesterday, November 13th, with the purpose of educating the public and advocating for transgender and gender non-conforming communities. And I'm beyond grateful to have 4 wonderful human beings and artists with us today to share with us their challenges and struggles that they have experienced in their education and their journeys. And I know that it truly takes so much courage and vulnerability to be here. And I also want to acknowledge that how challenging it is for our students and even alums to speak up what they need, what they wish to have or have had during their time in our programs because of the power dynamics and how it is structured in academia. And today, each of our brilliant panelists will be sharing their journey first, and our moderator, Gwen, who will be our next Vice President for DEI and MTEA, will be facilitating a discussion followed by a Q&A session. If you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to drop in the chat, or if you prefer to stay anonymous, we also have created a Google Doc for questions, which will be dropped in the chat as well. And our panelists will be sharing what they feel comfortable with, and they have every right to decline any questions that they deem inappropriate or uncomfortable. And in order to create a brave and supportive space for all of us, I would like to share a few community agreements from our DEI committee that I found helpful in creating an empowering and supportive space. And I invite all of us to apply them throughout our today's session. First, recognize our own privileges and how they affect the space. Use I statement to speak from a space for a space of personal responsibility. Acknowledge that intention does not equal impact. Be a learner, not a knower. Be curious. be open to new ideas and approaches. And throughout today's event, we might experience some discomfort and recognize some of our mistakes and privileges. Instead of suppressing those feelings and emotions, I want to invite all of us to sit in those emotions and to really think about where they come from, why they come from, and how we can learn from those emotions and feelings. And today's event is not to finger point at any institutions or specific professors that these panelists have encountered. The experiences and stories that they may share today are theirs, and not for us to judge or to personalize, but rather to take in these incidents, which is very generous of them to share with us, by the way, to brainstorm and come up with constructive ideas and plans to ensure that these harmful actions with language or lack of representation and inclusion won't happen again. And we all know that we are here to grow and learn together. So without further ado, I want to pass the microphone to our DEI member, Celeste Nelusa, to introduce our first panelist. Celeste.
Hello, everyone. I am super excited to share space with all of you and for focus group number 2. My name is Celeste Lanusa. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from the land of the Chumash, also known as Los Angeles, California. Our first panelist here is Leo Grierson. Pronouns they, he is a director, playwright, designer from the Pacific Northwest. Leo is currently pursuing an MFA in media design from the University of Maryland. Leo's work deals primarily with coming of age and queerness and how human beings grow and transition as digital mediums do the same. They have a BFA from Southern Oregon University and a certificate from the Gaiety School of Acting in Dublin, Ireland. They are the founder and artistic director of the Juvenilia Collective, as well as a producer for In the Margin Theater Company. They have worked in various capacities at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Marin Theater Company, B Street Theater, the Oregon Fringe Festival, Fresno Rogue Festival, Isolation Theater Company, and the Oregon Center for the Arts. You can learn more about Leo and their work at leogrierson.com.
Thank you so much, Celeste. That was an awesome introduction. Yes, my name is Leo. I am coming to you from the past, present, and future homelands of the Piscataway peoples here in Maryland, as the colonizers call it. Yeah, my journey begins at a very young age when I first learned that performing and being up on stage, I was funny and I could make people laugh. And once that happened, I was like, this is it for the rest of my life. But then as I grew older and continued to train, it became clear to me that a lot of my self-esteem and my understanding of myself was very invested in other people's perceptions of me. And that is the case often with performers, but it felt deeper than that. It felt tied into an expectation of femininity, and that pressure to be feminine and perform femininity followed me throughout my performing career. And it was an interesting kind of moment of collision where I tried directing for the first time, and that same year came out as non-binary. And as I continued to shed my gender expectations and explore my trans identity further, the more I began to understand my relationship with performing, and realized that that time as a performer in my life had really served its purpose, and I was able to let it go. Now my focus is entirely on directing and playwriting and teaching and in design. I officially came out as trans masculine about a year and a half ago, and that has been the most liberating thing for my art possible. I want to work with trans youth to create trans theater and empower them through digital theater in particular. And that's what I'm doing here at the University of Maryland. I found that my educational journey was long and winding because of my own issues with insecurity regarding my gender. And we can get into that a little bit more, but I'm sure we have other introductions to get going with.
Thank you so much. Our second panelist is Shy Wolf. They, Them is a multidisciplinary performing artist moved to perform in a world that prioritizes accessibility and inclusivity, with theater serving as a catalyst for social change. As a non-binary performer, Shy enjoys playing roles across the gender spectrum. Recent favorites include Henrik in A Little Night Music, Joe in Little Women, Kathy in genderqueer production of The Last 5 Years, and Chasen in At the Bar as part of the Sappho Project's virtual work lab. BA is finished in Oberlin College and is an alum at American Dance Festival and National Music Theater Institute. Follow Shy at Oh the Shy Romance.
Hey everyone, I'm Shy, they, them pronouns. It's super exciting to be here. Growing up, I never imagined this kind of panel could exist, so it's kind of cool. I had I guess you could say, a really standard musical theater kid experience. I saw a production of Seussical, and I saw myself. I found theater growing up to be one of the only places that I fit in. I was hooked specifically on musicals, and hasn't really changed since. I am pursuing musical theater as a professional actor, for a lot of reasons, some deeper than others. I think the deeper reasons being that I find musical theater really unique. I find the way that it touches so many different senses, singing, dancing, acting, really like provides an experience for changing lives and minds and hearts. And I think witnessing such a collective embodied experience as an audience can create a lot of really cool somatic healing. And the less deep answer is that it makes me really happy. So I grew up trained in musical theater, didn't think a lot about gender. Then I thought about gender and faced a crossroads where I thought that I would have to choose one or the other, theater career or coming out. And unfortunately, that was at the time when I was looking at colleges. So I ended up choosing a liberal arts college in favor of pursuing a BFA in musical theater. So essentially, choosing myself, choosing coming out, choosing exploring identity, because I didn't think there was a place to do both. And I ended up pursuing dance for a little bit, ended up exploring disability in a lot of ways, and yeah, kind of went all full circle until I graduated and ended up realizing, with the work of many, many incredible artists that I think in the last maybe 5-10 years have brought some really fabulous gender visibility into the world. Yeah, realizing that musical theater is still the thing that I love to do. And while I'm grateful for all the time to be self-exploring and realizing, what are my needs in this world, I definitely also experience a lot of grief. I think that's a kind of a trans thing to experience, a grief of lost time, a grief of, losing people. And I think there's space for it all. So that's a little bit about me. I'm looking forward to the rest of this panel.
Thank you so much for sharing. Our third panelist is Aurel Vargas Alanis. De Tu es Purepecha Tlahualil is a world-renowned indie queer artist from Winton, California, Yogut. They have worked regionally, nationally, internationally, and touring productions. Real serves as the current artistic director of the arts and advocacy organization In the Margin, leading an ensemble of intersectional and interdisciplinary QT BIPOC artists. They specialize in new work development and are named among the best Latinx comedic talent in the country by the Latinx Theater Commons. Real is a community organizer, curandera, minister, casting associate with Casting Collective, and co-owner of Sexy Tacos. Feel free to contact them to officiate your wedding or cater it, or both. Website is realbalanis.com, IG realbalanis, and RVA Casting, and In the Margin _ITM, and at Sexy I Tacos.
Thank you for that. Hindi hiari kwarishkani Real Vargas Alanis, anapuishkani Yoku's territory. Hi everyone, Real Vargas Alanis. Sign name is, sorry, it's like blurry, but like the R and then, yeah, there you go. Yeah. I'm zooming in from a Yokut territory, or El Barrio of Winton, California. Pronouns they, them, theirs, or inde, ima. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, everyone. Let's see. So I would describe myself as two spirits, which is a bit different from kind of like the transgender umbrella. I actually do not identify as transgender. I think in regards to trans, it's transformation or transition. And for me, I'm not transition or transforming into anything. So in regards to theater, I am not a musical theater actor, nor a musical theater kind of like artist per se. I started in music. So I started off as a percussionist, and I played in symphony, orchestra, and then I found theater. And so, I mean, I did both, and I'm currently producing a major scale musical. So in regards to involved in music, oh, also my dad was a DJ when I grew up. And so I love dance. Like my mom and I were the ones to, like, open La Pista del Baile and whatnot. But so, I was kind of exposed to the artistic sectors from like a really young age, not including kind of like cultural kind of artistic expression, right? In regards to theater, I was in A Christmas Carol when I was in 8th grade, and I'm actually going to be in it again later this year. I'm volunteering for a high school that they're doing a tour of like a mansion home, and every room has like a different Christmas Carol kind of scene. But I was in it, and someone encouraged me to continue theater, so then I did. When I was going to college, or considering going to college, I had no idea, first generation person, right? So I had no idea what to do in regards to looking for a college. Honestly, if it weren't for a high school counselor, I probably wouldn't have applied to college, because I didn't know what FAFSA was. I didn't know what you do in looking for a college, right? I was studying film and television, and then something happened where I had to transfer colleges, and they didn't have a film and television sector. So I started studying biology and psychology. Then I was like, oh God, I miss artistic expression. So I saw auditions, and I went to audition, and I said, all right, universe, if I get cast, I am changing my major. And I got cast. So I was like, well, I guess I got to follow through now. So I changed my major. And throughout, I actually started studying gender studies and ethnic studies. And I really enjoyed the courses because it was something that helped kind of provide language and definitions and terminology to be able to understand myself. And through just taking courses and whatnot, a counselor said, hey, you're actually about to complete another major. You cannot have 3 majors, but you can have 2 majors, and then you can have a minor. So then I became a gender studies dual degree, theater, gender studies, and then a minor in ethnic studies. Yeah, I guess I'll leave that for now, and then yeah, I guess we'll chat a little bit more. I'm gonna turn off my cam now.
Thank you so much. Wow, really looking forward to hearing more from everyone later. Our last panelist is B. Del Piane, pronouns she, they, graduated from the University of Northern Colorado's Music Theater program in spring of 2021. An actor, singer, and writer since childhood, she has been lucky enough to consistently perform in and create works for over half her life. They began their social and medical transition during the latter half of their junior year at UNCO and have never regretted it for a moment. Since graduating, B has moved to Seattle, Washington, and gotten involved in the local acting scene. But her main focus right now is on writing and developing season 2 of her sci-fi mystery podcast in Astra.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am Beatriz, or you can call me Bea. I'm not picky. Thank you so much, Celeste, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Carly, for interpreting for me. And just thank you all of MTEA for having me here. I was really excited to get the invite from Rose. Also very nervous. I was very nervous because I have, with my experiences with my gender transition and how it sort of affected how I navigate the world of theater, musical theater, it has been really challenging, and I don't necessarily have all the accolades that our other panelists do, doing all this incredible work, all these places. And a big part of that is because since graduating, I have really struggled to find what my place is in all of this stuff, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First things first is, like was said before, my pronouns are she, they. I really identify primarily as non-binary, but I also consider myself a transgender woman. I did make, the full transition the latter half of my college career, and it was very intimidating. I discovered musical theater when I was 10 or 11, and I had thought about, participating in these sort of things before, but it was a very silly, not that, it was a very silly school production of this random show that I think was like written for the school. And I got too nervous to audition for it. And I was like, this seems really fun, but I'm too nervous. And then I watched it from the little folding chairs that they set up in the gymnasium months later. And my heart the whole time was just like, oh, I want this. I wish I was up there on stage right now singing Everything's Groovy, this random show. And since then, I vowed to always audition for everything in school. And I did that throughout the rest of my high school career as well. And I decided that it was something that wasn't just a hobby for me. It was something I wanted to take really seriously and learn as much as I could about it. And through long and grueling and frankly just absurd amount of like inaccessibility of college auditions, I managed to get things done, and I went to University of Northern Colorado. And I'm really thankful for the time I had there, the professors who helped me so much, the friends who I would be a different person without them today, and just all that I learned. And when I think it was the summer after my freshman year, I realized it just like came to me one random night in the summer where it was like, I am not a boy, I don't know what this means, but this is, it was just something that completely like shattered my whole outlook on everything. And it just like came to me out of nowhere. But I knew it was true. And so I spent the next couple years discovering, like trying to sort of figure out what exactly I wanted. I was like, do I want a full medical social transition? Do I want to change my name, my pronouns, go on hormones? I didn't really know. Or like, am I just kind of okay? There's lots of options, right? And end of my junior year, I decided this is not really something I can put off anymore. I wanted to because I was really scared, mainly, because of the general stuff, but a huge part of it was because I had been studying for almost 3 years now, musical theater, which is a very, very gendered practice. And I knew that all of these songs I had been learning, all these things I had applied to what I was going to do after I graduated, a lot of it was just going to kind of not be relevant to me anymore. And I was really scared. I was like, will I be able to find new things that will work for me? Am I going to, I don't know, like, can this even work? And I eventually decided to come out because For me, because I didn't want to put it off anymore, I almost waited till the end of college, but I decided to do it then and there because I realized that I was probably not the only one. There were probably other people in my program who were feeling the same ways I was and were hiding it from themselves, hiding it from others. And ultimately I decided I don't want to, I would rather show people that even if it's really scary and you don't know if you're going to succeed, that you should always be yourself and you should live truthfully rather than hide away from that. And so I came out and it was very scary. It was very hard. It was also the same time COVID hit. But yeah, that made it very, very difficult. Those two things in tandem happening at the same time made the last year and a half of school very challenging. And I received a lot of help and I received a lot of supports. But it was also something that there was a lot of hurdles. Honestly, to this day, I don't know exactly how to overcome them. And I'll get into that later. I know I've been talking for a while. I just do want to say, I am really, really proud to be the first person in our program in terms of performers who has come out and transitioned. And since I did that, I have heard of several people, and I know several people in my program who have come out as well. And I think that if I even played like a small part in making them feel like it's okay to do that, then that's the most important thing to me. And I feel very, very proud. Yeah, I'll save the rest for after. I didn't expect to just get all that out there right now, but thank you so much. That's me.
Fantastic. So I think the next part of our discussion today is I'm going to invite all four of the panelists to come back on the screen. And I will just start asking some questions that we compiled for you, which will hopefully lead to a robust discussion and more questions and more knowledge. And I'm very honored to be here to learn from you all today. Again, my name is Gwen Walker. I am the incumbent Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at MTEA. And I am excited to meet you all. And I know some of you and not others. So I'm excited to meet you all and see you all and have this really important discussion with you tonight. So we asked the members of MTEA to send in questions to ask you all, and some of them were submitted by the people who are here today as well. The first question I wanted to ask you, and I want to just say, please feel free to just speak up and unmute yourselves for this conversation. And I'd love for it to be just that, a conversation, and you don't have to raise your hand or ask permission to speak. We're here to listen to you today. So I neglected to mention I use the she series of pronouns. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, where do you find your inspiration to stay committed to your performance goals in an environment that lacks representation?
I'll take it away. Actually, something that Bea brought up in sharing her journey really struck me in that I did not know trans people growing up. I knew that they existed, but I did not know any. And when I met the first person in my life who identified as non-binary, it wasn't very long until I realized that was something that felt correct for me. And then it was watching a production of, it was the pro shot of Newsies, let's just be honest, on Disney Plus, and the trans mask energy radiating off of that show that brought me to begin my social transition as a trans mask person. And I think for me, it is, as maybe I don't think it's self-centered to say this. I hope not anyway, but being the representation that I wished I had, and being the kind of performer and role model that I would have liked to have had as a younger person is what guides my practice and keeps pushing me forward even when it's really hard.
Thank you, Leah.
Yeah, I really relate to all of that. I feel like my inspiration comes from like past, present, future trans people in theater. I'm inspired by the people that I know who are doing the work I want to be doing. And in turn, I'm inspired when I'm doing the work and people reach out to me after a show and say, hey, like, I saw you up there, I saw me up there. Um, and I feel like, as someone who holds a lot of different identities, some of which include queer, trans, disabled, neurodivergent, Ashkenazi Jewish, it's like, you know, representation, like both on and off the stage, I think is what inspires me to know that with each show that I'm doing, with each barrier that I face, like we are moving towards a better world, towards the world that I want to be part of. And every time that I overcome something that I need to, I know that I'm doing the work myself. And hopefully, with each relationship that I make, it's, you know, one person, two people, exponential growth of healing.
Real or Bea, did you have anything you wanted to add? The
Yeah.
Original question is, where do you find your inspiration to stay committed to your theater performance goals or your performance goals in an environment that lacks representation?
Created my own. So it's you know, the dates back to undergrad. My cohort and I by accident ended up being all marginalized students. But the reason I say by accident is because some people transferred in, some people, you know, they transferred in from junior college, or some people changed their major. And so that was amongst like the first time that had happened. And via conversations, we were like, hey, are you noticing this, that? Like, it's not just me, right? Or like, is it just me? Are you notice? Are professors treating you like XYZ? And the answer, unfortunately, was like, oh yes, like we're all navigating this. To try to make a long story short, we compiled 11 to 14, I'm forgetting, but 11 to 14 page, like essentially an article. It was an open letter that's called the Legacy Letter, that outlined each and every malpractice, including like mental health, including gender and sexuality, including race and ethnicity, anything in regards that were happening inside the class, along with the productions that the faculty and whatnot were like producing. And so we also gave like a list of suggestions. Shit hit the fan real quick when we released that. Like, it did not go well. There was a lot of reprimands. Some people still don't have their degrees to this day because of it. But what also happened was that my cohort and I became really, really like tight knit. And we would go off and train other places, and then would come back and teach each other. And that's how, in the margin, my current organization that I am the artistic director for was formed. That's how it was born. And I recall very clearly a moment at the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival where I attended an EDIA panel, or I think it was called EDI. I don't think they did accessibility, but went to an EDI panel, and it was facilitated by a bunch of white professors. And one of the biggest takeaway was American theater is not for you. The biggest takeaway and the biggest thing that they said was, you need to make your own, which I'm like, right, there's like problematic things in regards to that. But at a certain point, because I heard it so much, it's not for you, it's not for you, it's not for you, I said, you know what, you're right. And actually, I don't want to be part of it. I want to create a new canon. And so that's why I produce a lot of new works. I champion new works. I specialize in new work development as a director as well. I love the new work process. I love scouting playwrights. I like to marginalized playwrights. I love to hear what they're creating and provide a space that we can quote unquote fail. For me, failure is not you know, failure is not doing. So I want to provide a space where we can just explore, because there's a lot of times where people feel pressure that's like, it must be good or else I'm closing the door on anyone behind me. And for me, it's like, no, we need to be able to explore things. And if they're fantastic, then incredible. And if, if they don't kind of meet the expectation that you thought it did, hey, that's why there's workshops. That's why we go into further development. That's, we get a dramaturg, whatever that looks like. And so that's my biggest thing, is that, for anyone else who's being told that American theater is not for you, then sure, I don't want to be part of it. I want to create the new canon. And that's what keeps me going.
Thank y'all for sharing all that. That's wonderful. I love hearing about people succeeding when others tell them they shouldn't or they can't. I was hesitant to share my perspective, but I do think it's important, so I will share it. I second a lot of what everyone is saying, where I want to do it for the people who will come after me. I want to do it for my friends and my family who need this help right now. And I'm also stubborn, and I want to show that I can do it, even though they say I can't. At the same time, though, being completely honest, I graduated 1.5 years ago, and not solely because of this. There's a lot going on in my personal life and with my mental health as well, but in a big part of because I just don't necessarily know how to overcome a lot of these hurdles with having transitioned pretty late in my college career. It's really hard to not get completely crushed by that sometimes. And I try to have the motivation. I want to create. I have all these things I want to make, but I feel like I don't necessarily have the resources, or if they're there, I don't know how to find them. I've tried, and I'm not giving up. I haven't given up, but I have sort of been in this space for a long time now, where it has felt like I wish I could be here and be like, yeah, it was hard, but I've overcome it, and now I'm like doing all these great successful things. Because honestly, I haven't been, and I really, really would like to, but it just feels so, it feels almost impossible sometimes. And I know it's not. And I am like, I know that no matter how hard it gets, like, I'm never giving up. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying this is hopeless or anything, because it's not. But how do I keep that motivation to achieve my goals? I try, but I don't always succeed. I haven't been succeeding very well for a long time. Again, I don't say that to be depressing or anything, but this is the perspective that I think a lot of people have, and I think it's important to share. And like I said, there's hope. I'm not giving up. And look at all these wonderful panelists who have done so much incredible work. It's so inspiring to me. So anyway, that's what I have on that.
Thank you for your vulnerability, Bea, and for sharing your beautiful heart with us. Yes, thank you. So if it's all right, I'd like to move on to another question. What advice would you give to the theater educators? Now, there's not that many people here tonight. I think there's 20 people or 30 people here tonight, but the most of the viewing that happens of our webinars happens, people watch the tape, because educators are super, super busy, especially at night. They're probably in rehearsal, right? So at this time of the semester, so they're trust that this will be seen by lots and lots of folks. But we would all like to learn what you have to teach us today. And one of the questions that was sent in by one of the professors was, what advice would you give to theater educators to help them empower and support marginalized students?
I would say be open to feedback. And when you receive feedback, don't get defensive. it's important and crucial to receive feedback. And I know that sometimes it can be taken kind of hard, right? Because that's when we center our ego, and it's remove the ego from the conversation so then we can be able to move forward. Analyze and think critically. Think about the impact that, as we mentioned earlier, right? Intention is different than impact. So recognize and acknowledge and take accountability for the impact that you have perhaps exuded. And also, a great thing is usually kind of student committees, and encourage students and whatnot to deeply analyze the programs and see what it is that they need so we can continue to better ourselves. You know, something that's the norm or a constant is very stagnant. And as opposed to just listening, take action, and then be very transparent. And sometimes, or not sometimes, it's okay not to know. You can be very transparent about that, you know, because then together we can actually come up with something. And so it's about collaboration. Even if we're in a educational setting where it's very hierarchical, it's still a collaboration, especially in theater.
I completely agree with that. I think feedback and not getting defensive is so important. I think also that there's a lot of, at least in my experience, the past few years, there's been a lot of like, hey, we're having panels similar to this in schools or other communities where like we want to hear from certain marginalized people. We want to hear like what we can do better. And a lot of times after that, it's just kind of dropped there. It's kind of like, we did the work, we did it, we listened, and there's not really much concrete change from there. And so I think like consistently always not being like, how can I like, I was doing it wrong, so how do I do it right? But rather instead just being like always looking to see like, how can I improve, and like helping make things more accessible? How can I improve to help all of my students, not just the ones who have certain privileges? I think making it a continual thing instead of just holding a few discussions and then being like, all right, we did it. I also really liked what you said about it's just admitting when you don't know. I think a big thing, especially with like collegiate professors or, you know, people who are bigger names in the theater world, they kind of feel like they have to be this beacon of knowledge and all this stuff. So if you are coming to them with this stuff where you're like, hey, like, what can we do to like help with this and stuff like that, they kind of act like they feel like they have to have all the answers. And a lot of times that can just come from a place of ignorance. And that's when they get defensive, when you're like, well, actually, I don't think it's that, it's this. And I would ask so many people, so many professors, so many people who would like visit our school as like guest artists, who are like names in the industry, like in New York, in LA, even people on like Broadway, stuff like that. I would always ask them every time. I'm like, hey, here are my struggles I'm going with. I'm like really scared about going into the real world and graduating. What do I do what do I do about these struggles? And they always would just give me some pat on the back, some like motivational kind of vague speech, like the world is changing and we're doing all this stuff. But really like what it came down to, even though they didn't say the words, every time was just, they didn't know. And they were just trying to talk around it in a way that seemed like they did know. And it was very discouraging. So I think if we can at least like acknowledge that maybe not everyone has all the answers, like Dad said, we can work together to make things happen.
Oh yeah, thirded, fourth, fifth, infinited. Something that happened to me in my undergrad experience when I first came out as non-binary, I think I would have reached some conclusions about myself sooner had the professors and mentors in my life not focused so much on telling me what I was going to lose if I took these steps forward. And that fear of losing out on commercial work that my professors had for me, and what ultimately was their perception of who I was and where that perception fit into this industry, that I know their fear of what would happen to me, a student that they cared about. I was a beloved student. I was the musical theater girl in the jewel tone dress and the character heels, and wanting to be a more masculinized version of that. I think my teachers were my mentors were afraid for me. So they talked so much about what I was going to lose, that I would lose my talent, that I would lose places in theaters that I wanted to work at, all of these things. And not once, I don't think, a professor talked to me about the things I would gain. And yet I don't think I would have had any gains in this career industry in my life if I did not make the choice to move forward with transition. Because your student will gain self-esteem that is like beyond anything that they could possibly have if they denied themselves. And that support, if a student comes to you and is talking to you about these things, just like from my own personal experience, the policy and all those things, like those are must happens. And on a more interpersonal level, talking to your student about what they could gain. And it's okay not to know what that is, but know that it is something, and talking to them about what they will lose will crush them.
Gosh, this is touching me really deeply. Definitely, like, yeah, if someone had told me that like my identity was something that like could be a benefit or something to celebrate instead of just like an obstacle to keep overcoming, I think that being trans is to know despair really, really intimately. And I think someone in the chat earlier said despair and hope combined, and I think, yeah, a little less despair, a little more hope. I also think listening to B talk about just like, the kind of way people try to tell you things, but you kind of know what they're really saying. I think that being trans comes with a really high bullshit meter. And I don't say that to scare people. I say that to say that it's true. When you grow up trying to like analyze yourself and how you fit into things, you really see where people are coming from. And so I think that my biggest advice, kind of echoing what people are saying, is really to walk the talk. You can say all the right things, you can use all the right words, you can even use the right pronouns, but I can always tell when someone is using my pronouns versus actually seeing me authentically, seeing my gender. My biggest advice that I give to allies just in my own life is like, think about your own gender, like cis people, think about, why do you use the pronouns you use? Have you really figured it out? Because I think it's until cis people are doing that work, they can like, they can't really understand like that it's not just about the pronouns. And I think that a benefit of doing that work is that pronouns become a lot easier to use. So I think that's something that I find really important. And then I guess like extending on walking your talk, really just making sure you're living up to all of your anti-oppression values and accessibility and anti-racist work. And yeah, really being proactive about that instead of, waiting till the student walks into the room to be like, oh, wait, there's a lot I have to learn here. Yeah, I guess I really loved what everyone was saying about feedback. And I guess like jumping on that, I would say the proactive encouragement of feedback instead of just waiting for it to come to you. It takes a lot of labor to give feedback to someone in power. And I think that like a constant verbalizing of, hey, I'm open to feedback, I want to hear anonymous feedback, is always a great thing to have. And yeah, I think just an awareness and acknowledgement of all the different power dynamics that are always at play in a space is something that is always really useful. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say.
Just going to give space, a little bit of space to that, all that wonderful sharing that you all just did. And it's my job to keep the conversation going. So I will say, I thank you. Thank you. I'm very deeply touched by what you have said, and I'm learning that things, and I'm also writing down quotes from all of you that I will memorize and carry in my heart. So I thank you. What kind of resources and guidance do you wish that you had when you began your education that you didn't get, or as you were preparing to audition for a program? what kind of resources or guidance do you feel that we could offer as educators that would be valuable to someone like you?
So I think it's kind of hollow when a faculty member is like, well, you can go to the Queer Resource Center on campus. It feels very much like pushing the problem off of their plate because they don't know, likely, and they don't want to deal with it. I would have, and I know like resources, all of these things are going to like come up, and I don't want to like negate how strapped for cash a lot of colleges are, but there is such an abundance of queer artists out there. I find it so hard to believe that you could not find one to come and do a workshop or something to connect your students with someone who is like out there doing the work and has identities that align with theirs. Like, I just think not, I wish that I had something that wasn't a negative, like, and was actually like proactive to do. But I do, if your first impulse is to tell your student to go to the Queer Resource Center, that's not actually providing resources at all. I wish I could answer this question better, but that I think doing a little bit more digging into how you can facilitate bringing queer artists into a space is one way. And I may chime in later if more ideas come to me.
This is like basic minimum. I wish I got attention. In regards to not just attention of like, ooh, look at me, but attention in regards to training, because, you know, a lot of like major roles and whatnot went to pretty much all white students, and we were cast as like servants, and or banditos and stuff. But there's also, I recall, I'm thinking of my ERDA auditions for MFA acting programs, and I had asked several professors if they could look through my monologues. And the chair of the department said, well, why are you even going? You're not going to get anything. Yeah. And then another professor watched my scene just once, and was like, yeah, it's pretty good. And that's kind of it, right? And so as an educator myself, it's one of those things of, I want to see what I can provide my students and what skill sets do I have that I can provide some sort of tools, because that's what I wanted, was just tools. And you know, to kind of like bring something back up that B mentioned, is that I am also very stubborn. And so although yes, I create my own works and whatnot, like I work in large regional theaters, I do touring productions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I hate this, but what drove me was my stubbornness to prove otherwise, of saying like, all right, vas a ver, like you are completely undermining, you're completely just underestimating and not even seeing anything of what I can do. Additionally, what Leo mentioned was, I would have loved to have some sort of guest artist come in and do workshops. One of the biggest things that the school did in regards to bringing in guest artists was to just fill in roles. So we would do productions and they would bring in guest artists to just do the roles, but they wouldn't provide any workshops, any training, which I'm like, even if they're going to come in and just, you know, act in a play, that's the school production, like, okay, but they're not going to provide actual, yes, exactly what it was. Like, they're not actually going to provide any kind of, if they're an AEA actor, right, or an equity actor, they're not going to provide any kind of like insight on what equity is. They're not going to provide insight or like audition prep or anything like that, right, which was all in the letter that we wrote. And so I think, that's my biggest thing, is just providing supports, and just you know, if your student wants to try something, just support it. And yeah, I think because I'm losing a little bit of my train of thought, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was kind of looking over these questions and thinking about them with some other trans people, and I asked this question, and what they said was no cis people, like an entirely trans program. And while I think that, you know, wouldn't actually be possible. I was thinking, like, why there's all safe spaces for lots of different identities, but when you're the only one, a safe space is kind of just you in the corner. So I feel like some kind of way to connect with other trans people who are in programs, maybe like a Zoom group or something. Because I think there could have been a lot of really incredible guidance that I could have gotten from professors, but honestly, given that I went to college at a time when there weren't a lot of professional trans people to look up to like there are now. I would have loved there to be a path of this is what a non-binary musical theater performer looks like. And I admire, like, I think a lot of the other people on this panel are really incredible, like multifaceted creators, directors, like people who make their own work. But I really just I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to act and sing and dance. And I would have loved to just to have someone say, like, okay, and this is what that path looks like, instead of being consistently asked to create my own path. Because, that's a lot of creating and a lot of labor that other people are not doing. And I think that, not being the only one, or not knowing that I was the only one, even if it was across other programs, could have helped at least with support of that. And I think, yeah, something else like resource guidance wise that would have helped is just kind of going back to the conversation of celebration on identities, instead of them being a burden. I would have loved for proactive conversations of identities, of what did it mean to put a trans person in this role. And in the program that I did end up attending, like, I was able to play lots of roles of different genders, but it was kind of just like treated as a blank slate. I think is something we think about a lot in theater with like our theater blacks, and we're kind of coming in as if we're empty canvases, like, where we try on our roles. And I think that the guidance to, instead of coming in like that, to come in with our full selves to discuss all of those things and what does that mean, and to really have proactive spaces for those conversations to be happening would have been great.
I have been kind of trying to think of like I've been trying to think of I've been really trying to think of specific things to say, but it's kind of hard when, as the others are saying, the problems are sort of just like so baked into what the culture is. And honestly, at least for musical theater, maybe not quite as much with acting, but still definitely there. It's just really baked into the very foundation of it, and it's all very binary, and it's all very cis binary specifically. I would really love connecting with other trans people, like you have said, and I don't know, because a lot of times it just feels like I don't have anything to really go off of. I think that breaking down this sort of cis binary way that is really, really strong in at least musical theater, that's, from my experience, I can speak on that, would be really helpful. And not just for trans people, but for cis people as well. Like, it's very, very, very limiting for everyone to just be like, all the classes, all the shows, everything is really, really separated by like boys and girls. And like, that's it. And it doesn't just cause problems when there's a non-binary person there, or someone who's transitioning from, say, one to the other. It definitely does cause problems when that happens. It really, really shines a light on why the system is not great, but it's not great it's just not great in general. And I think that if we weren't so focused on like boys can do this and girls can do this, we wouldn't even have a lot of these issues in the first place. I think even a lot of cis people would, exactly, the binary doesn't help anyone. And sort of breaking down a lot of those things, like, just, I think when you're putting programs into practice, just like asking yourself, does this need to be separated into like boy group, girl group, or I don't know, just these very sort of binary ideas, or like, can anyone sort of take part in any aspect of what you're working on? And a lot of the time, I think the answer is anyone can sort of do whatever they choose or want to do. And I'm losing my train of thought as well, but I think I struggle a lot because in terms of voice being binary, as like a musical theater singer, that has been one of my like biggest struggles, because having like fully transitioned, I don't want to look at boy roles. I don't want to be like, no, that's just so far away from what I am now. And yet I kind of don't, there's not really a lot of roles for me that exist because of, my voice. I've gone through a lot of vocal training for my speaking, but there's only so much you can do with your natural vocal range as a singer. And with that kind of binary thing, I really have no clue how to undo that, because most musical theater music is written to be very binary. Even if you kind of change a key or two here and there, the way the vocal lines are written are very gendered. And I haven't really found an answer to that. I don't really know how to fix that. But I think we should try. And with all these other binary sort of categorizations throughout training, I think a lot of those, you could just ditch them tomorrow and there would be no issues. Things would just get better.
I know nobody showed up tonight to hear me talk, but I have a couple things I want to say to you, Bea. And one is, at Penn State right now, we're producing Rent, and our mark is one of our is a non-binary human, and we are changing keys in the entire show so that they can be our mark. And it's happening much more in the industry. And I know in my voice studio anyway, everybody sings anything they want in any key. And it's just really about what music speaks to you. Shy is my voice student. Shy is saying, yeah, it's true. We do, I'd say that, please talk to me after. And also I want to say that something that to the educators who are listening, one of the things that I investigate as an educator is, and that I think people need to talk about more, is the fact that when we include more people, the art that we make is better. And science has proven that. Like, when we are inclusive, people are smarter, people are more committed to the team, people work harder. There's just all of these things that make inclusion something we should all be fighting for. I just think that maybe as educators, we are the people with some power who can change how we're doing it on an educative level. And then our students go out into the world and expect that the world is changing, and then they demand it. So that's my hope. I'll shut up now.
No, I know that this question was about resources, and I mean, I don't know where to begin with, like, read this, go to there, who to that, all of that. But like, the resource of just like reminding yourself that like the academy as it exists for teaching artists is to create product, and gender variance at its core is so anti-capitalist. It is not marketable, and I am not interested in being turned into a product, and I don't think your students are interested in being turned into a product. If you are able and don't make faces or be frustrated with changing a key, change a key. If you need to get technology to help you do that, it exists. You can change a key. And if we can break away from trying to make cookie cutter actors to put into an industry that doesn't exist anymore, let's be honest. If we can listen to students when they tell us what they want and what they're interested in working on. So if Shy were to like come to me and say like, I don't want to make my own thing, I want to be a musical theater actor. If B were to come to me and say the same, like, as an educator, it's my role to help facilitate the learning that they want to do. Capitalism and academy be damned.
In regards to resources, LGBT Youth in America School by Jason Chicharo and Sean Cahill. I don't know. I probably just butchered all their names, but it's I think it's a must read for all educators, and even like non-educators. It provides a really huge insight on issues that are going on nationwide. In regards to LGBT youth in schools, right? But it has like letters and whatnot from actual students. It has testimonies. It has situations that happen in schools. It gives information about certain laws, such as like the no homo promo laws that are still in place in certain states. Anyway, I would say read that to have a more deeper understanding of what your queer students might have lived through going up into through the educational system.
Did anybody want to add on to that? I stuck the, yeah, I stuck the link for the book in the chat there. So I want to take a second to encourage anybody who's here to drop a question in the chat if you have any questions for our wonderful panel. And otherwise, I'm happy to continue this conversation with them. So I'll keep my eye on the chat. And we have about 3 minutes for any. We've had a very lively conversation. Then we have about 3 minutes. I would also like to say that if you all have any closing comments or any thoughts that have come up while you're listening to other people speak that you wanted to add to the conversation, now would be a great time to do that and not listen to me ask you more questions. But if you have something you'd like to close with, add, speak to. I have more questions. What steps do you think need to be taken to create a more inclusive marketing and recruitment process for theater training programs?
Where to begin? I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to pretend like I'm super knowledgeable on this, but I mentioned briefly in my introduction about accessibility. This goes far beyond just trans people. This is really a huge issue of race and class and a whole lot of other things. But just the college audition process is so inaccessible. You have to fly places. You have to hire people to just to understand like the culture and the etiquette and like all the things you're supposed to do that don't like really matter, like how to walk into a room and how to like format your resume, which like in my humble opinion, like that's all kind of bullshit. Hidden curriculum, exactly. It's just all very inaccessible. And like if you didn't grow up in these schools that are lucky enough to have you're lucky enough to have, that they'll taught you all that, or if you can hire someone to have those connections and be able to teach you all of it, there's no way you can know this stuff, much less have access to like a piano and have things, be able to practice to accompaniment, all this stuff. I just think we need to stop acting like everyone, or just like the only people who deserve to follow their passions are the ones who are literally able to afford it.
I know that in MTEA, we are working in the DEI committee, we are working on creating a free resource for people for college preparatory, a list of people that people can contact, anyone can contact for free online coaching for college prep. And I know that at Penn State anyway, I'm saying this just as a suggestion to everybody, we are, even though we're back in person for auditions, we're doing one virtual day for people who that makes it a barrier for those people. I can't talk at this hour of the night. I am so sorry. I'm stumble. I drove home from New York today and I'm exhausted. Anyway, we have one virtual day so that people can cannot make it to campus for any reason, if travel is a barrier, if money is an issue, we can still see them. So that's just something that schools can do.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, and a nice segue, speaking of exhaustion, I think talking about access and transness, like you can't not talk about disability and chronic illness, especially given that trans people have such high rates of it. And I think thinking about just like, I don't know, I think inclusivity, you have to think about not only like physical access, like who can enter a space physically, um, but I think just the nature of how high neurodivergence and transness intersects, and are you creating a learning environment that's inclusive? Are people able to even understand the materials? Are people encouraged to bring their full selves, or are they going to be masking themselves just to, enter a space in a theater training program? So I think that I would have loved to see a training program that even had some level of awareness of celebration of different ways of, I think we're in theater, we're here to play, we're here to be unique and different. So it's never really made sense to me that like hidden curriculum of professionalism and what I think is just white supremacy culture of, having to mold yourself to fit into a certain box. So I think, yeah, there are endless ways to brainstorm different access needs being met for that kind of environment. And I think also just like promoting a culture that honors different needs around rest. I think, a lot of what I saw when I was looking at audition programs was we pride ourselves on how hard we work. We never sleep. We live and breathe theater. And, I don't think that's really the kind of environment I would have wanted to be a part of. So I would have just loved to see a program that honored self-care, but also community care, and a lot of mindfulness of the barriers that people with differing identities face. I think, being trans is expensive. It takes a lot of time. And I think a program that really just in its promotion of what they do really just honored that actors are humans first would have been a really fabulous way to be inclusive, and hopefully will be in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, everything everyone has said already. And just, I did a lot of school. And if I've learned anything from doing so much school, it's that the academy is really just a pile of gate-kept resources. And any way that you can communicate to students that you are trying to open up that gate and allow them access to all the spoils of riches that these academies hold, whether it be experience and like actually getting on stage and opportunities to perform, grants, fellowships, internship opportunities, well, not as long as they're paid, but really demonstrating to students that your institution is not the dragon hoarding all of the jewels in the cave. It is wanting to bestow the jewels on everybody.
Mine's a little simple in regards to, yes, to what everyone said. My thing would be, all right, hang in there. Shakespeare, Dear Jesus Christ. So in regards to auditions, there's usually a classic requirement, right? And it's usually Shakespeare. I'm not bashing on Shakespeare. I worked at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival multiple seasons, right? I taught Shakespeare to people, but like sometimes it doesn't land in our tongue, right? If we speak other languages. And I know it's usually like a training thing, right? Where it's like we need to see that you have a plethora of, skill sets that you can do contemporary work and you can do classical work. Okay, let the classical work be a different type of classic. It can be Golden Age from Spain. It can be any kind of, it can be like some, like the Injustice to Dao, which is like something that's from 838 AD or something like that, right? There are other types of classical works that you can encourage people to do. Also, with regards to contemporary works, there's sometimes a requirement that it has to be like a published, established work. And there are a lot of new works that are currently stuck in the workshop cycle because, you know, you have to write the thing, you have to send it to workshops, and then it'll go into workshop, then it'll go into festival, and then it'll be in festival until it can, you know, have a performance like 30 years later where it's like, oh, well, this was super, super relevant like 30 years before. But there are great monologues and great pieces that are written for people like us with contemporary works. Also, folks don't know, you can check out the New Play Exchange under the National New Play Network. Really great resource to find new works. And there's also, I think, like filters where you can choose, you know, what it is that you're kind of looking for. But yes, that would be my thing. Because it's one of my pet peeves where, again, I can do Shakespeare. Not bashing Shakespeare, right? I'm sure there's people who are like super, I'm sure there are people who are like super die hard with it, right? But like when it comes to auditions, it's a little bit, it's a barrier that I don't like, I should say.
We need to wrap and go to and move on to our next. We're going to do a little breathing session together. I would like to say that the Musical Theater Educators Alliance has created a new resource of new works. And we can, maybe Rose could put something about that in the chat so that people can look at that. It will be a place for all musical theater educators to find new work for their students. And I am going to hand it over now to Jamie for a breathing exercise. First, I want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing your hearts with us today and for teaching us. And I know that your time is extraordinarily valuable and that you don't owe us this work. And I thank you for your labor tonight and for sharing your beautiful hearts and minds with us.
Thank you, Gwen. And I just want to echo what Gwen was saying. I actually started typing in chat so many times, and then I'd have to go back because I was trying to keep up with everybody. And I was so inspired by what you were saying. And I might cry because I've been up a lot this week with rehearsals and kids and everything and not slept and spent time with family who are having health issues. But there's so much love that I felt in this session. And so I'm just very grateful that you brought this with such love and your experiences with such love. And so I hope that those of us that were here felt that and received everything that was shared with the love that it was expressed. And I hope those who watch further will. So what I'm going to ask us to do now is simply to think of one or two things that you either heard or felt or experienced tonight that you want to keep with you. And I call these golden nuggets. The golden nuggets are those ideas that we keep in our back pockets to share and hold on to change our lives, but then share when the time is right. I'm going to ask you to breathe in. And because I'm a dancer, I'm going to ask you to breathe in for a count of 8. And breathe in that count of 8 on those golden nuggets. And as you breathe out, I'm going to ask you again on a count of 8 to send that out to the universe, that you will have the opportunity to share those golden nuggets that you've received tonight with someone else in the near future. So if you can just breathe in with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then out on a slow 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for sharing and allowing me to be part of your expression tonight. I think this is the end of what we were doing tonight. Leo, I'm going to turn the time back to you.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, everyone. And especially to our panelists. My heart is so warm right now. And, not just me taking down so many notes tonight. I feel like a lot of educators who are here tonight, we learned so much from you. And I just want to say that right now we have the privilege to learn from these panelists. We have all the golden nuggets that we got today. Let's try to think, how can we bring those things back to our classrooms, and not just in our classroom, but also in our institutions and in our friends group, in the society. How can we and go out and vote, even though we just, passed our midterm election. But in the future, how can we make our voice being heard and be allies to our friends, to these wonderful folks? And, in terms of gender equality, gender affirming care, and things like this, those are the things that we need to continue to care about, and not just in our institutions or in our studio, in our classroom. So thank you, our panelists. I sincerely, really, really thank you for coming here tonight and sharing your journey with us. And if anyone at your institutions would like to reach out to our wonderful panelists today, please feel free to reach out to us. But I just want to readdress the importance of compensating their time and their labor and their wisdom. And finally, I want to thank Gwen, Celeste, Rose, Jamie, and everyone who make this panel possible, and also Kikau coming in to share about the conference. We hope to see you there. Because of everyone's effort and dedication, I really, really believe that our industry and our system, our educational system, will continue to grow and evolve to a place that we all long to be in. So stay safe, everyone, and I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.